Every mom and dad's love should be without any strings. But sometimes the folks we count on most can stab us in the back in ways we never dreamed. This 8-year-old kid named Sarah found out this sad fact when her own dad ditched her at some random guy's cabin up in the Colorado hills. What seemed like a timeout for smashing her mom's plates was actually something way scarier. The old guy who spotted her, Ezra McCallum, had been on his own for 20 years with his own hidden stuff. When he swung open his door and saw the freaked-out little girl, he had no clue her dad had bigger schemes. As winter hit the far-off cabin, Sarah began figuring out that her being left wasn't just by chance. Her dad was covering up an awful secret that could wreck their family. The hills kept secrets that only family ties could uncover. But what was her dad truly plotting? And why did it involve ditching his daughter? Before we dive back in, share where you're listening from. And if this tale hits home, be sure you're following, because tomorrow I've got something super cool saved for you. The morning fog stuck to the pine trees like old thoughts that won't go away, and Sarah Whitmore smooshed her tiny face against the bumpy wooden door of the cabin, hearing for the noise of her dad's wagon wheels. But the hill quiet went on and on, broken only by the soft whoosh of wind through the green trees and the far-off cry of a hawk flying above. She had been right there for what seemed like forever, hugging her old cloth doll tight to her chest. The doll's washed-out blue dress looked like her own, and its button eyes seemed to get stuff that 8-year-old Sarah couldn't say out loud yet. Her dad's last words rang in her head. "You'll see what happens to kids who don't listen to grown-ups. Stay put until I come back for you." The way he'd said it, with that mean chill in his voice she'd never heard before, made her tummy flip like a twisty snack. Inside the cabin, Ezra McCallum sat at his bumpy handmade table, looking at the hot cup of coffee getting cold between his rough hands. 20 years alone had shown him to pay attention to the hill's beats. And something about this morning felt off, not right, when he'd opened his door an hour ago to find the shaking kid on his step. Everything he'd made in this lonely spot had changed like rocks in Aslide. The girl couldn't be older than 8 or 9, with red hair that grabbed the morning sun, and green eyes that held too much fear for someone so little. She reminded him of someone he'd once known, though the thought slipped just out of reach, like smoke from a fading fire. Her clothes were nice but worn from the trip, and she held herself with the careful way of a kid who'd learned that staying small might keep her out of trouble. Ezra got up from his chair, his joints complaining after too many cold hill winters and old hurts that never fully fixed. Okay. At 53, he moved with the careful saving of steps of a guy who'd learned that extra moves could mean life or death. His beard had gone more gray than brown, and his hands had scars from both fights and woodwork. Most people would have called him scary, but there was something about the lost kid at his door that woke up feelings he'd hidden deeper than any hole. He opened the door slow, not wanting to scare her more than she already was. Sarah turned to him, and he saw tears running down her dirty cheeks. In that second, she looked so much like Elena that his breath stopped in his chest. Elena Whitmore, who'd been Elena Morrison when she was 17, and he was a young fighter heading to Vietnam. Elena, who'd said she'd wait for him, and had wed another guy while he was learning to fight in far jungles. "Your dad's not coming back today, kid," Ezra said soft, though the words tasted bad. He'd seen the guy's wagon vanish down the hill path with the kind of speed that said relief, not sadness. "Might as well come inside where it's warm." Sarah's hold got tighter on her doll, and she looked up at him with those killer green eyes. "Hassayed I was getting punished for breaking Mama's plates, but I didn't do it on purpose." The wind grabbed the door and it banged and everything just dropped. Her voice was tiny and careful, the way kids sound when they've learned that grown-ups don't always hear the full tale. Ezra's jaw got tight. He'd seen enough of life to spot mean acts dressed as lessons, and leaving a kid in the wild crossed every rule he'd ever thought holy. "Well, oopsies happen," he said, stepping back to let her in. "And smashing dishes isn't a bad thing worth this kind of time out." The cabin's inside was plain with stuff but super clean. A stone fire spot took up one wall with a few books lined on a rough shelf next to it. The chairs and tables looked homemade but strong, and everything was in its spot. Sarah saw a wooden box on the fire shelf, old and smooth from lots of touches. Something about it pulled her eyes, though she couldn't say why. "Are you hungry?" Ezra asked, going toward Thyron's stove, where a pot of soup had been bubbling since early. He'd learned long ago that giving food was often the first way to get to know folks. And this kid looked like she hadn't eaten right in days. Sarah nodded a bit, then spoke up. "Yes, sir, but I don't have any cash to give you." The grown-up way she said it made Ezra's heart hurt. No 8-year-old should worry about money stuff. "Money's not big up here anyway," he said, scooping soup into a bowl. "The deer don't take bills, and the hills don't ask for rent." As Sarah ate, her nosy side started to beat her fear. She looked at the cabin's things with the focus of someone solving a riddle. The books on the shelf were mostly about animals and staying alive, but there was also a book of poems and what looked like an army guide. The wooden box on the fire shelf seemed to pull her, though she was too polite to touch stuff without asking. "What's in the box?" she asked at last, her spoon stopped halfway to her mouth. Ezra looked where she did and felt his chest squeeze. The box had his bronze star, his purple heart, and a few other bits from a life he'd tried to forget. But it also had a photo of Elena taken when they were young and thought the world had no ends, just some old thoughts, he said, which was all true and not enough. Nothing a young girl like you would like. But Sarah was smarter than most grown-ups thought. She'd spent her 8 years watching and hearing, learning to see the gaps between words where real facts often hid. "My mama used to have a box like that," she said quiet. She kept it secret in her room, and sometimes I'd see her looking at the stuff inside when she thought no one saw. She'd get this sad smile like she was thinking of something pretty that hurt. Ezra's hand stopped on his coffee cup. "Your mama's name was Elena, wasn't it?" Sarah's eyes got big. "How did you know that?" The question floated in the air like morning mist, heavy with stuff neither was ready to dig into. Outside, the wind got stronger, shaking the cabin's windows and reminding them both that winter was coming to the hills with all its tough, sure things. Ezra walked to the window and looked out at the woods that had been both his jail and his safe spot for 2 decades. Somewhere out there, a guy had ditched his daughter-like junk, and every gut feeling Ezra had from his soldier days told him there was more to this tale than simple dad meanness. "I knew your mom a long time ago," he said at last, his voice rough with old thoughts. "Before you were born, before she wed your dad." He turned back to Sarah, who was watching him with the kind of focus that comes from finally hearing real stuff after years of half-stories. She was the nicest person I've ever met. "And if she was your mama, then you're welcome in this cabin for as long as you need to stay?" Sarah's bottom lip shook and new tears ran down her cheeks. But these weren't scared tears anymore. They were the tricky tears of a kid starting to get that the grown-up world was way more mixed up than she'd ever thought, and that sometimes the folks who should guard you were the ones you needed guarding from. As the afternoon went on, Ezra showed Sarah around the cabin, telling how the wood stove worked, where the extra blankets were kept, and how to use the hand pump for water. She took it all in with the fast smarts of someone who'd learned early that knowing stuff could mean safe or danger. "Will my dad really come back?" she asked, as the sun started to drop behind the hills, coloring the sky in shades of orange and yellow. Ezra thought about lying, thought about giving fake comfort the way grown-ups often did with kids. But there was something in Sarah's eyes that wanted real talk, even when the truth was tough to take. "I don't know," he said. "But I'll tell you what I do know. You're safe here, and you'll stay safe as long as I'm alive. That's a promise." That night, as Sarah lay in the cabin's tiny extra room, hugging her cloth doll, she heard the hill sounds coming through the walls. Somewhere in the dark, an owl hooted to its buddy, and the wind sang soft songs through the pine branches. For the first time since her dad had driven off that morning, she felt something that might have been calm starting to grow in her chest. In the main room, Ezra sat by the fading fire, looking at the wooden box on the fire shelf. Tomorrow he would have to start making choices about the kid sleeping in his extra room. Tonight, though, he let himself remember Alina Morrison as she'd been at 17, with red hair and green eyes, and a laugh that could brighten the darkest spots of a young soldier's heart. Some old debts, he thought, came in shapes you never saw coming, but they were debts all the same. 3 days went by before Sarah found the thing that would flip everything she thought she knew about her dad and why he left her. She had been helping Ezra with morning jobs, learning to chop small wood with a hatchet almost as big as she was. When she saw something white sticking out from under the firewood, her dad had dropped from his wagon. "Mr. Ezra," she called, using the polite name he nicely fixed her to use instead of just, "Sir, there's something stuck under here." Ezra looked up from where he was, checking the cabin's storm covers, getting ready for the bad weather that the hill's little sign said was coming soon. The way the squirrels grabbed nuts, the thick fur on horses down in the valley, even the special kind of light in the late day, all of it talked of a winter that would come eerily and stay long. Sarah pulled at the white thing, and Ezra's blood went cold as he knew what she was tugging out. It was an envelope, fancy paper that didn't belong in these hills, and it was sent to Thomas Whitmore in writing that looked more like a law paper than a nice note. "Give that here, oh kid," Ezra said, his voice carefully even. But Sarah had already ripped it open with the normal nosy of a kid who'd spent too many years having facts kept from her. Her face went white as she read, and Ezra watched her green eyes get big with a knowing no 8-year-old should have to hold. The letter shook in her small hands as she read it out, her voice getting tinier with each word. "Mr. Whitmore, your debt to our group has hit bad level. The amount of 47,000 plus extra fees is a sum that needs fixing right now. As talked about, other ways for payment have been okayed. The drop-off of stuff as said will clear the owed amount. Not doing this deal by the set date will lead to getting it back ways that go beyond normal money fixes. Signed, Marcus Volkov." Ezra felt the old fighter's gut feelings he'd spent 20 years trying to hide buzz back to life like a kicked bee nest. Volkov. He knew that name, though he wished to God he didn't. Marcus Volkov ran bad betting games all over Colorado and Wyoming, and his getting-back ways had given him a name that made tough bad guys pray when his name popped up in talk. "What does it mean?" Sarah asked, though her voice said she already got more than she wanted. "What stuff?" Ezra's hands balled into fists at his sides. He'd seen enough of the world's bad tosspot exactly what kind of deal Thomas Whitmore had set up with guys like Volkov. The get-it hit them like a real hit. Sarah hadn't been ditched as time out for breaking dishes. She'd been dropped off like a thing to pay her dad's betting owed. "Sarah," he said soft, kneeling to her height, "stuff means something worth a lot that someone gives as a promise to pay back cash they owe. Like when someone borrows cash to buy a house, the house becomes stuff." "But I'm not a house," Sarah said, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm a person." The pure in that broke something in Ezra's chest. He'd spent 2 decades in these hills trying to forget what folks could do to each other. And now he was faced with bad, wearing the mask of dad power. "You're totally right," he said strong. "You are a person, and people are never stuff. What your dad did is wrong. Sarah, wrong and against the law, and something no parent should ever do to their kid." As if called by their chat, the sound of horse feet came from the path below the cabin. Ezra's army training kicked in right away. Count the horses. Check the danger. Spot getaway paths. 3 horses moving at a steady speed that said sure, not hurry. These weren't lost folks or nice visitors. "Sarah, I need you to go inside right now," Ezra said, his voice taking on the kind of boss that allowed no fight. "Get under your bed and stay there until I come get you. Don't make a sound no matter what you hear." "But what about you, Sarah?" She ran inside, and Ezra heard the soft thump of her body hitting the floor as she slid under the extra room bed. Good girl. Elena's daughter had got her mom's fast thinking along with her eyes and hair. The 3 riders came out from the trees as the afternoon sun made long shadows across the open spot. Ezra knew the type right away. City guys trying to look like outdoor folks, their clothes too new and their sitting too stiff for people who fit in these hills. The boss was a skinny guy with light eyes and the kind of still that talked of held-back fights. "You, Ezra McCallum?" the guy called out, not getting off. "Depends who's asking," Ezra answered, letting his hands hang loose at his sides in a way that looked chill, but put him close to the hunting knife on his belt. "Marcus Volkov sent us. We're here about a drop-off that was supposed to happen." Ezra felt his jaw tighten. "Don't know anything about any drop-off?" The skinny guy smiled, and it was the kind of look that had probably been the last thing many folks saw. Thomas Whitmore was supposed to leave his daughter here. Little girl about 8 years old, red hair. "We're here to pick her up, mister," Ezra said, letting a bit of his old Arkansas talk slip in. "I've been living alone on this hill for 20 years. Haven't seen a thing of Thomas Whitmore or any little girl." It wasn't fully a lie. He'd seen Thomas Whitmore for maybe 5 minutes total, and most of that was the guy's back as he drove off. But Ezra had learned during his years in Southeast Asia that real was often less big than staying alive. And right now, staying alive meant keeping Sarah from these guys. The second rider, A big guy with scars on his knuckles that talked of a life in fights shifted in his seat. "Boss, maybe we should look around. Make sure he's honest." "That would be stepping on land," Ezra said, easy. "And I'm not real nice to steppers." The skinny guy's light eyes looked at Ezra with the kind of check that hunters do when picking if prey is worth the risk. What he saw was a guy in his 50s, gray-bearded and worn, wearing work stuff and holding himself like someone used to being alone. What he couldn't see was the bronze star hidden in the wooden box on the fire shelf, or the body memory of 100 night attacks that lived in Ezra's hands and shoulders. "We'll be back," the skinny guy said at last. "Whitmore swore on his mom's grave that he left the girl here. If we find out you're lying, old man, this talk won't be nearly so nice next time." They turned their horses around and vanished back into the trees. But Ezra knew they wouldn't go far. Guys like Volkov's muscle didn't quit easy, and 47,000 was big cash. They'd be back with more guys and less nice. Inside the cabin, Sarah came out from under the bed like a tiny ghost, her face white with knowing that had made her older in minutes. "They came for me, didn't they?" she said. Ezra nodded serious. "They did, and they'll be back." Sarah dropped into one of the wooden chairs, still holding the letter that had shown her dad's stab. "He sold me," she said, the words hard to hear. "My own daddy sold me to pay for betting." The hurt in her voice made Ezra want to hunt Thomas Whitmore and show him exactly what 20 years of hill living and army training had taught him about giving pain to folks who earned it. Instead, he knelt by Sarah's chair and softly took the letter from her shaking hands. "Listen to me," he said, strong. "What your dad did was unforgivable, but it doesn't say who you are or what your life will be. Those guys think they can come up here and take you like you're a chair, but they're wrong. Dead wrong." "But what can we do?" Sarah asked, tears running down her cheeks. "They'll keep coming back, and there's only one of you and lots of them." Ezra smiled, and for the first time since the rider showed, it was a real look. "Sarah, I did 3 trips in Vietnam and another 10 years doing stuff for the bosses that I can't talk about even now. Those guys down there think they're tough because they can scare shop folks and beat up people who can't hit back. They have no clue what real tough looks like." He stood and went to the wooden box on the fire shelf, opening it for the first time since Sarah came. Inside, next to his army medals, was a photo of Elena taken when she was 17. Sarah gasped when she saw it. "That's my mama," she whispered. "But she looks so young." "She was young," Ezra said soft. "We both were. I was about to head to Vietnam, and she promised to wait for me." He touched the photo gentle. "She didn't wait, and I can't say I blame her. War changes people, and I came back different than I left." "Is that why you live up here alone?" Ezra nodded partly. "But maybe it's time for that to change." He looked down at Sarah, seeing Elena's brave in the set of her small jaw, Elena's smarts and the way she was already thinking ahead to the hard stuff they faced. "Those guys made a mistake today. They showed me exactly what your dad did to you, and now I know what I'm fighting for." As night fell over the hill, Ezra started making setups that would have been known to any fighter who'd ever had to guard a spot against more folks. He checked the cabin's view lines, counted bullets, and in his head listed every plus the land might give. Sarah watched him work with the focus of someone trying to remember every bit. "Are we going to fight them?" "If we have to," Ezra said. "But first, we're going to make sure you're safe. And that means you're going to learn some things your dad should have taught you, but didn't that night." As Sarah lay in bed hearing Ezra moving quiet around the cabin, locking windows and checking doors, she got that her old life, the life where she trusted her dad and thought parents always guarded their kids, was gone for good. In its place was something tougher and more mixed up, but also something that felt more real. Outside in the dark, 3 guys sat around a small campfire, plotting their next trip to the cabin on the hill. They had no way of knowing that the guy they brushed off as an old loner was already 3 steps ahead of them, or that the kid they thought of as stuff had got her mom's strong back along with her green eyes. Winter was coming to the hills, but the real bad weather was already here. Sarah found her mom's wedding ring on the 4th night after the guys had come, and finding it felt like getting a note from the dead. She had been holding her cloth doll tight in the dark, looking for comfort from the cozy soft that had been her steady buddy through every kid fear and worry. When her fingers felt something hard and small sewn into the doll's stuffing, working careful by moonlight coming through the cabin's small window, she used her nails to pick at the tiny stitches until she could reach inside the doll's body. Her fingers grabbed something round and smooth metal that had been warmed by years of being held close to the doll's cotton heart. When she pulled it out, even in the low light, she knew it was her mom's wedding ring. Not the plain gold band her dad had made Elena wear after their wedding, but the pretty silver ring with tiny carved flowers that Elena had shown Sarah in secret, whispering that it had been a gift from someone special long before Sarah was born. "Mama hid this for me," Sarah whispered to the doll, getting it flooding through her with the clear that sometimes comes to kids in moments of big find. Her mom had known something might happen, had got ready for the chance that Sarah might need this link to her past when everything else was taken. She slipped the ring onto her thumb. It was way too big for her other fingers and felt something move in her chest. The ring carried weight beyond its silver, carried her mom's love and smart thinking, and maybe even okay for the path Sarah now found herself on with the hill guy, who had known Elena as a girl. In the main room, Ezra heard the soft sounds of Sarah moving and knew them as the fidget of someone dealing with thoughts too big for easy sleep. He'd been sitting by the dying fire, cleaning his old pistol with the step-by-step care of a guy who got that a gun might be the difference between Sarah living and dying in the days to come. "Can't sleep?" he asked soft when she showed in the doorway, still hugging her doll. Sarah shook her head and held out her hand, showing him the ring shining on her thumb. "I found this inside my doll. Mama must have put it there." Ezra's breath stopped in his throat as he knew the ring he'd saved. 3 months of a fighter's pay to buy for Elena Morrison in 1972. He'd given it to her the night before he headed to Vietnam, along with a promise to come back and wed her right when the war was over. She'd cried when she took it, not from joy, but from some knowing that even at 17 she'd had about the way the world worked and the promises it kept or broke. "She told me once that someone very special had given it to her," Sarah said, sitting in the chair across from him. "Someone she cared about who went away to war." "That someone was me," Ezra said simple, setting down the gun and looking at Sarah with eyes that held years of sorry and getting. "I loved your mom very much and she loved me. But war changed me, and when I came back, she'd already wed your dad and was waiting for you." Sarah looked at his face in the firelight, seeing the young fighter her mom had loved, shown in the worn features of the guy who was now guarding her. "Is that why you came to live up here? Because you were sad about losing her?" "Partly," Ezra said, "but also because the war taught me things about myself that I didn't like. I'd gotten good at hurting people, Sarah, too good. And when I came home, I found I didn't know how to be around folks who'd never had to do the things I'd done." "But you're good with me," Sarah said with the straight talk kids have when they're trying to get the grown-up world. "You've been nicer to me in 4 days than my dad was in months before he left me here." Ezra felt his throat squeeze. "That's because you're Elena's daughter, and because no kid deserves what your dad tried to do to you." The next morning, Ezra began teaching Sarah the skills she would need to stay alive in the hills. But he did the lessons with the weight of someone who got that stuff learned. Slow was stuff kept forever. They started with the basics. How to spot food plants, how to read weather signs and how animals act, how to move through the woods without leaving clear tracks. Sarah turned out to be a fast learner, her natural smarts sharpened by the knowing that these weren't games, but tools for staying alive. She listened with the focus of someone whose life might hang on remembering every bit. And Ezra found himself wowed by her skill to ask the right questions and keep hard info. "Why do we walk on rocks when we can?" she asked as they practiced moving quiet through the woods behind the cabin. "Because rocks don't keep footprints the way soft dirt does," Ezra told. "And if those guys come back with buddies, we don't want to make it easy for them to follow us." "Are we going to have to run away?" Ezra stopped in his show of how to step to avoid breaking sticks underfoot. "Maybe. Or maybe we'll make them decide that coming after us isn't worth the hassle. But either way, you need to know how to take care of yourself in these hills." As the days went by, their bond got deeper in the way that happens when two people find they can trust each other fully. Ezra found himself remembering how to be soft without being weak, how to teach without being bossy, how to guard without being too much. Sarah, for her part, started to chill in ways she never had with her dad, asking questions without fear of laughs and messing up without fear of time out. The ring on her thumb became a lucky charm, a real reminder that her mom's love had gone past death and miles to give exactly what Sarah needed when she needed it most. She would touch it during hard times, getting strong from the link to Elena and the knowing that the guy teaching her to stay alive had loved her mom with the kind of stick that lasted years beyond its end. One evening, as they sat by the fire after a day of practicing what to do if bad, Sarah asked the question that had been growing in her mind since she'd found the ring. If you loved my mama so much and she loved you, why didn't you ever try to see her after she got wed? Ezra looked into the flames for a long time before answering. Because she picked and it wasn't me, and because the guy who came back from Vietnam wasn't the same guy she'd fallen for. I didn't want her to see what I'd become. But what if she would have got it? Maybe she would have, Ezra said soft. But I was too proud and too scared to find out. That's something I'll be sorry for the rest of my life. Sarah, don't you make the same mistake when you're older. Don't let proud keep you from the folks who count. Outside the cabin, the first real snow of the season started to fall. Big flakes that would pile into the kind of wall that made hill trips risky for anyone not ready for winter's tough facts. Inside, Sarah and Ezra kept their quiet chat, building the base of trust and getting that would keep them through the hard times ahead. Neither of them saw the footprints in the fresh snow near the trees or the way the horses in the valley below had been spooked by new smells. The guys who had come for Sarah were still watching, still plotting. But winter was changing the rules of fight in ways that would help the hill guy and the little girl who had got her mom's brave along with her ring. As Sarah fell asleep that night, she touched the ring on her thumb and whispered a thank you prayer to the mom she missed every day. Elena had given her daughter more than bling. She had given her a link to someone who would die before letting hurt come to her. Someone who carried Elena's memory like a holy job and would honor it by guarding the kid she'd left behind. In the main room, Ezra sat cleaning his gun and plotting for stuff he hoped would never happen. But for the first time in 20 years, he had something worth fighting for beyond just staying alive. He had Elena's daughter to guard. And that made him feel more like the guy he'd been before the war than anything had in 2 decades of Hill alone. The gun's stash under the cabin's floor showed itself to Sarah quite by oops. On a cloudy morning when she was helping Ezra with jobs, and dropped Elena's ring through a gap in the wooden boards. As she knelt to get it, her small fingers hit not dirt and rock as thought, but the smooth metal of something that for sure didn't belong in the normal base of a hill cabin. "Mr. Ezra," she called, her voice carrying the special tone kids use when they found something big. "There's something metal under here." Ezra looked up from where he'd been looking at the trees through the kitchen window, his focus sharpened by gut that had kept him alive through 3 trips in bad land. For the past 2 days, he'd seen small signs that they were being watched. Broken branches at eye height that said someone had been using lookers. Messed snow patterns that showed moving during night when good folks slept. He walked over to where Sarah knelt and saw right away what had happened. The loose board that hid his just-in-case supplies had moved just enough to show a corner of the metal bullet box he'd hoped never to need. In 20 years of hill living, no one had ever found his secret setups. And now an 8-year-old girl had tripped over them while hunting for her mom's ring. "Sarah," he said soft, helping her up and getting the ring from where it fell. "What you found is something I hoped you'd never see. But given our spot, maybe it's time you got what we're really up against." He lifted the loose floorboards, showing a space that had been dug careful and lined with plastic to keep its stuff from wet. Inside were 3 guns, 2 hand ones, enough bullets to outfit a small group. Doctor supplies that went way past basic help, and gear that talked of a guy who'd learned to get ready for the worst while hoping for the best. Sarah looked at the stash with big eyes, not scared, but hooked in the way kids often are when grown-up secrets are finally shown. "Is this why those guys were afraid of you?" "They weren't afraid of me," Ezra fixed, lifting out one of the guns to check it. "They were being careful, because they don't know what they're up against. That's about to change." He'd seen them again that morning. 3 guys at different spots around the cabin's edge, moving with the kind of team that said Army or cop training. But their rules were sloppy. They moved in day when they should have waited for dark, and they'd picked spots that gave good views but bad getaways. "Sarah, I need you to listen real careful," Ezra said, his voice taking on the tone he'd once used to tell fighters before risky jobs. "Those guys who came looking for you, they're back, and this time they brought buddies. We're going to have to guard ourselves." "Are you going to hurt them?" Sarah asked, her straight cutting straight to the heart of the right-wrong mix that Ezra had been dealing with since the second he'd got what Thomas Whitmore had done to his daughter. I'm going to guard you, Ezra said simple, whatever that takes. Over the next hour, he showed Sarah how the guns worked, not because he wanted to make a kid into a fighter, but because knowing might be the difference between her living and dying if something happened to him. She learned to load and unload the guns to tell between different kinds of bullets, to get the basic ways of gun safety. I don't want to hurt anyone, Sarah said as she practiced the slide on an old hunting gun that was almost as stall as she was. Hurting folks should never be something you want to do, Ezra agreed. But sometimes good folks have to do tough things to guard nice folks. That's just how the world works, and acting like it's not doesn't make anyone safer. By midday, Ezra had sure what his gut had been saying. They were ringed by at least 6 guys who were setting up for what looked like a team hit on the cabin. Through his look glasses, he could see they were better gunned and better set than the 3 who'd come before. Volkov was taking the spot serious now. Why don't we just leave? Sarah asked as they watched one of the guys moving through the trees below the cabin. We could go deeper into the hills where they can't find us. Because running would mean ditching everything and spending the winter in the wild with just what we can carry, Ezra told. And 'cause guys like this don't quit easy. They'd keep hunting us, and at last they'd find us when we were cold and tired and not ready. So we fight here. We make our stand here, Ezra fixed. This cabin gives us pluses they can't match. Thick walls, few ways in, good view lines, and supplies that will last longer than theirs. As afternoon went toward evening, Ezra put the last bits of his guard plan in place. Sarah helped by remembering the spots of just-in-case supplies, getaway paths, and meet spots. Her quick mind taking in fight info with the same focus she brought to learning about food plants and weather signs. If something happens to me, Ezra said as they made their final setups. You know where the just-in-case packs are hidden, and you know the path that leads to the ranger spot 15 miles south. It's marked with yellow marks on the trees. Nothing's going to happen to you, Sarah said with the fierce sure of a kid who'd already lost too many folks she cared about. Probably not, Ezra agreed. But fighters always plan for what-ifs. The hit came just after sunset when the low light would make good shooting hard, but wouldn't yet need fake light that might show spots. Ezra had guessed this time. It was what he would have picked if he'd been plotting a hit on Aguard's spot. The first shots came from 3 different ways at once, testing the cabin's guards and trying to figure how many folks were inside and how good they were gunned. Ezra hit back with careful placed shots that were made more to show skill than to hurt, though he made sure his shots came close enough to make them respect his aim. Stay low and stay quiet, he told Sarah, who had set herself in the corner of the main room, furthest from the windows, just as they'd practiced. Let me handle this. The gunfight lasted less than 10 minutes, but it set some key facts for both sides. The hitters learned that the cabin had at least 1 person with army guns, and the skill toused them good. Ezra learned that he was facing pros who would poke for weak spots rather than using full-force hit. When the shooting stopped, a weird quiet fell over the hill-open spot. Ezra kept his gun aimed on the most likely come way while Sarah stayed perfect, still in her spot. Both of them hearing the little sounds that might show moving in the dark beyond the cabin walls. "McCallum," a voice called from the trees. "Let's talk." "I'm hearing," Ezra called back, not moving from his guard spot behind the flipped kitchen table. "You're outgunned 6-1, and we've got enough bullets to keep this up all night. Send out the girl and we'll leave you chill." "Other idea," Ezra yelled back. "You pack up and head back to whatever city you came from, and I won't start shooting to kill." The answer was another round of shots. This one longer and meaner than the first. But Ezra had used the break-in fight to fix his spot, and his hit back made the hitters take cover rather than keep their push. As the second swap of shots faded into hill quiet, Sarah looked up at Ezra from her corner and saw something in his face that she'd never seen in her dad's. Total will to guard her no matter what it cost him. "Are you scared?" she whispered, terrified. Ezra said, honest. "But not of them? I'm scared of what happens to you if I mess up." Outside in the dark, 6 guys settled in for what they now got would be a longer wait than they'd plotted. Inside the cabin, a rough hill guy and the daughter of the woman he'd loved got ready for a fight that would say if Sarah Whitmore would grow up free or vanish into the kind of life that left no marks and followed no rules. The ring on Sarah's thumb grabbed the firelight as she touched it for brave, and somewhere in the space between old thoughts and hope, Elena Morrison smiled at the thought that her daughter had found her way to the one guy in the world who would die before letting hurt come to her. The burned photo showed itself in the cold ashes of the fire spot 3 days after the first gunfight, and its find would force Sarah to face facts about her family that she'd never dreamed possible. She'd been cleaning the fire spot as part of her morning jobs when her small fingers hit something that felt different from the usual junk of burned wood and paper, something with the stiff feel of photo paper that had been part eaten by flames, working careful to avoid ripping the weak bit. She pulled out what was left of a family photo. She could see herself at maybe 6 years old, standing between her parents and what looked like their backyard in Denver. Her mom's image was whole, showing Elena's soft smile and the way she'd always put a guarding hand on Sarah's shoulder. But her dad's face had been on purpose burned away, the flames eating through the paper in a way too exact to be oops. "Mr. Ezra," Sarah called soft, her voice carrying the weight of a find that felt both big and worrying. Ezra looked up from where he'd been making the cabin's window covers stronger with extra boards, getting ready for the weight he knew was coming. The guys in the woods had backed off after the gunfight, but they hadn't gone. His morning check had shown at least 8 people now set around the cabin's edge, and someone with stuff was running their moves. When he saw what Sarah held in her hands, his look got serious. He knew the photo right away. It was one he'd burned in a mad moment years ago when he'd finally learned that Elena had died in a car crash while he was still too proud and too hurt to reach out to her. "Where did you find that?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "In the fire spot," Sarah said, looking at the image with the focus of someone trying to solve a puzzle with lost bits. "Someone burned Daddy's face out of it, but they kept the part with me and Mama." Ezra sank into his chair, the weight of old secrets and hard truths pushing down on him like the hill snow that was starting to pile outside the cabin. He'd hoped to guard Sarah from the more mixed grown-up world for a bit longer, but stuff was forcing his hand. "I burned that picture," he said. "About 5 years ago, when I learned that your mom had died, Sarah's green eyes got wide with getting. You knew Mama was dead, but you never tried to find me. I didn't know you were real until you showed on my step," Ezra said. "Real. Your mom and I lost touch after she wed your dad. I didn't even know she'd had a kid. But if you loved her so much, why didn't you at least try to stay in touch?" The question cut to the heart of sorries that Ezra had been holding for years. He looked at Sarah, Elena's daughter, with her mom's eyes and her mom's brave, and got that some truths were too big to soft with comfy lies. "Because I was mad," he said, simple mad that she'd wed someone else, mad that the war had changed me, mad at the world for not being how I wanted. So, I came up here and spent 20 years being a grumpy old guy instead of dealing with my feelings like a grown-up should. Sarah looked at the photo again, running her finger along the burned edge where her dad's face had been. "Why did you burn his part out but not ours?" "Because even though I was mad, I could never make myself wreck the image of your mom. And you?" He stopped, fighting with feelings he'd kept hidden for years. "You were part of her, and that made you holy to me even before I knew you." The chat was cut by the sound of voices coming across the open spot. Ezra moved to the window and peeked through a gap in the boards, his army training auto checking the new stuff. 2 more cars had come during their talk, bringing what looked like extra folks and gear. "They're not quitting," Sarah said, joining him at the window despite his wave for her to stay back. "No, they're not. And that tells me this isn't just about getting a debt anymore. Someone's made this personal." As if to mark his point, a voice called out from the trees. Not one of the guys who'd been there before, but someone new, someone with boss. "McCallum, I want to talk." Ezra knew the voice right away, though he hadn't heard it in over 20 years. Marcus Volkov himself had come to the hill, which meant the bets had gone up way beyond what Ezra had first thought. "Sarah, get to your spot," Ezra said quiet. "This is about to get mixed." He opened the door just enough to make his voice go without showing himself to shooter fire. "I'm hearing, Volkov. You know who I am. Good. That should make this easier." Volkov's talk carried bits of East Europe mixed with years of American city living. "I want the girl, and I want her alive and not hurt. In swap, I'll make sure you die quick instead of slow." "Other offer," Ezra called back. "You pack up your bunch of city hunters and head back to whatever city you came from. And I won't start cutting their numbers for good." The answer came as laughs that had no warmth at all. "You think you're up against street bads, old guy? I've got 12 pros out here and winter's coming. How long do you think your food will last? How long before that little girl gets sick of being stuck in a cabin with a crazy loner? Ezra didn't answer right away, instead using the time to count gun flashes he could see set around the open spot. Volkov wasn't lying about the numbers. They were bad outgunned and the fight spot was getting worse fast. What makes her so worth? Ezra finally called out. $47,000 is a lot of cash, but you're spending more than that just keeping all these folks here. That's not your worry, McCallum. Your worry should be making this easy on yourself and the girl. But Sarah, hearing from her spot in the corner, felt bits of a bigger puzzle starting to snap in her mind. She remembered talks she'd heard between her parents, fights that had seemed nothing at the time, but now had new meaning. Her dad hadn't just been betting. He'd been betting with folks who had links to things way more risky than simple debt-getting. "Mr. Ezra," she whispered quick, "I think I know why they want me so bad." Ezra moved away from the door, keeping his gun ready while hearing what Sarah had got. "My mama had a safe box," Sarah said quiet. "She thought I didn't know about it, but I saw her go there sometimes when Daddy was at work. She'd come back looking worried like she was trying to fix something big." "What does that have to do with the ring?" Sarah cut in, holding up her thumb where Elena's silver band shined in the firelight. "What if it's not just a ring? What if Mama hid something else? Something that could get these folks in trouble?" Ezra felt his blood go cold as the what-ifs hit him. If Elena had somehow got proof of Volkov's stuff, bank stuff, deal details, photos, and if that proof was hidden somewhere only Sarah could get, then the girl wasn't just stuff for her dad's ode. She was the key to info that could wreck one of the most risky bad groups in the Rocky Hill area. "Sarah, think careful. Did your mom ever say anything about keeping secrets safe? About guarding you from something?" Sarah shut her eyes, trying to recall talks that had seemed like nothing grown-up chat at the time. Slowly, bits began to come up. Her mom's quiet voice talking about safe plans and making sure Sarah would be taken care of no matter what. "She used to say that someday I might need to be brave and remember where she kept the big papers," Sarah said slow. "She said, if anything ever happened to her, I should look for the place where the flowers never die." Ezra's army mind right away began working this new info and its fight what-ifs. If Sarah had the key to proof that could bring down Volkov's group, then the bad boss had no pick but to get her no matter the cost. And if he couldn't get her alive, he'd for sure want her dead to stop the proof from ever coming up. "The flowers never die," Ezra said again. "Does that mean anything special to you?" "There was a place Mama used to take me sometimes, a graveyard where she'd visit her grandma's grave. The flowers there were made of metal and stone. They never died because they weren't really alive." The bits were dropping in place now, making a picture that was way more mixed and drisky than a simple betting ode. Elena had somehow got proof of Volkov's bad stuff, probably through her hubby's link with bad betting spots. She'd hidden that proof and given her daughter the hints needed to find it, making a safe plan that would guard Sarah if anything happened to her. But Thomas Whitmore, wild to pay his ode, and probably not knowing what his wife had been doing, had dropped Sarah right to the folks she had proof against. It was a stab so full and so bad that Ezra felt his hands shake with the want to find Thomas Whitmore and get the kind of payback that left forever marks. "We need to get you out of here," Ezra said serious. "If I'm right about what your mom did, these folks will never stop hunting you. Not until they get whatever proof she got. But where can we go?" "They'll just follow us. Maybe. But first we have to live long enough to worry about running." Ezra moved back to the window and peeked out at the spots he could spot in the growing dark. "Sarah, I need you to get something. These folks aren't going to quit and go home. This is going to end with either them dead or us dead, and I'd like it Betham." As night fell over the hill open spot, the temp dropped, and the snow started falling heavier, making stuff that would test everyone's stick and will. Inside the cabin, a rough old fighter and the daughter of the woman he'd loved got ready for a wait that would say if proof of year-sold bads would ever see day. Outside in the dark, Marcus Volkov settled in for what he knew might be a long wait. He had stuff wait, and the full will of a guy who got that not getting or killing. Sarah Whitmore would mean the end of everything. He'd built over 30 years of careful bad business. The burned photo lay on the cabin's table, its hurt surface showing the firelight promise that some secrets were worth dying to guard, and some stabs wanted a payback that could only be paid in blood. The book that would show the real size of Thomas Whitmore's stab lay hidden under Sarah's mattress in the cabin's extra room, and she found it purely by oops when a loose floorboard moved under the bed's weight during her fidget sleep. Sarah had been flipping and turning, bugged by bad dreams about her dad's face melting into smoke. When she felt the mattress dip in a way that said something hard under it, working quiet so as not to wake Ezra, who had been swapping sleep-and watch through the wait's third night, Sarah slipped her hand between the mattress and the wooden bed frame. Her fingers hit a leather book that felt big and key with the weight of something that held secrets too risky for easy find. By lamplight, she opened what was her dad's private book, a full record of betting owed, bad links, and money deals that painted a pic of Thomas Whitmore as way more than a guy who just got too deep at card tables. The notes written in her dad's careful writing showed years of on-purpose link with Marcus Volkoff's group. The numbers were huge. Her dad hadn't piled $47,000 in betting owed over a few months of bad luck. He'd been cleaning cash for Volkoff's bad business for over 3 years, taking cuts that had grown into a big personal pile. But somewhere along, Thomas had got greedy or sloppy, and cash that belonged to bad folks had ended up in his own spots. More bad than the money details were the personal notes spread through the book. Her dad had written about Elena's growing doubts, about her threats to take Sarah and go if he didn't get out of his bad links. He noted his wife's find of his stuff and her promise to get proof that would wreck both him and Volkoff if anything happened to her. Or Sarah, that dumb woman, thinks she can threaten me. One note read, dated just 2 months before Elena's car crash. She doesn't get that these folks don't talk with wives who know too much? If she pushes this more, she'll learn exactly how risky it is to mess with business that doesn't touch her. Sarah felt her world type on its side as the what-ifs of what she was reading became clear. Her mom's death hadn't been a crash at all. It had been set by her own hubby, working with the bad group that was now waiting at the hill cabin. "Mr. Ezra," she whispered, her voice barely hear, but carrying enough hurry to wake him from his light nap in the chair by the window. Ezra woke right away, his hand going to the gun by his chair before he fully got that the danger was in for rather than real. "What is it, Sarah?" She held out the book with shaking hands, unable to say the words that would make her dad's stab real and full. Ezra took the book and started reading by lamplight, his look getting harder with each page until his face looked like cut stone. "My God," he breathed, getting the full size of what Elena had been up against in the months before her death. "Sarah, your mom was trying to guard you from all this. She knew what your dad had become, and she was getting proof to stop him. He killed her, didn't he?" Sarah asked, the words barely more than a whisper. "My own daddy killed my mama." Ezra set the book aside and knelt by Sarah's chair, his worn hands soft on her shoulders. "It looks that way, kid. I'm sorry you had to learn this, but you needed to know what we're really fighting." The feel hit of the show was bad, but Sarah had got Elena's strong back along with her green eyes. Instead of falling under the weight of stab and sad, she felt something getting hard in her chest, a will that felt grown up and full. "They're not getting away with this," she said quiet, her voice carrying a stick that would have made her mom proud. "Mama died trying to guard me, and I'm not going to let that be for nothing." Ezra looked at her face in the lamplight and saw the change that sometimes happens when kids are forced to grow fast. The scared 8-year-old who'd been ditched at his step was gone, swapped by someone who got the real way of the world and was ready to fight for right no matter the own cost. "Sarah, what your dad did was unforgivable, but you're still just a kid. You don't have to." "Yes, I do." She cut in her tone, allowing no fight. "These folks killed my mama and tried to sell me like I was stuff. Someone has to make them pay for that." Their chat was cut by the sound of moving outside the cabin, not the careful setting of shooters or the fight moving of hit teams, but the normal doings of folks setting up a more forever camp. Through gaps in the covered windows, they could see the glow of campfires and hear the low talk of voices plotting something more mixed than a simple hit. Ezra moved to his watch spot and used his look glasses to check the new stuff. What he saw sure his worst fears. Volkoff was setting in for a long wait, full with supply lines and extra plans that said he was ready to wait weeks if needed. "They're not planning to storm the cabin," Ezra said, serious. "They're going to make us hungry out. How long can we last with careful sharing? Maybe 3 weeks. But that thinks they don't find a way to cut our water or burn us out." Sarah moved to the window and looked at the bad spots with the think focus she'd got from her mom. "What if we don't wait for them to hungry us out? What if we hit first?" Ezra looked at her with surprise and growing like, "Sarah, there are at least 12 of them out there, and they're pros. Even with army training and good guard spots, those aren't odds that help living. But they're not thinking we'll hit, are they? They think we're stuck in here, scared and waiting for help that isn't coming. She was right. And Ezra felt his fight thinking shift to take in stuff he hadn't thought before. His army time had taught him that sometimes the worst spots needed the boldest answers, and there was something cool about taking the fight to folks who thought they had him stuck. Even if we could somehow cut their numbers, Ezra said, careful, we'd still need somewhere to go after. They've probably got folks watching every path down the hill. Then we don't go down the hill. We go up. Ezra frowned, not getting her think. Sarah, there's nothing up there but wild. No roads, no towns, no help. But there's the old mining camp, Sarah said, remembering tales her mom had told about the area's past. Mama used to talk about the silver mines that worked up here in the 1800s. She said some of the tunnels go for miles under, linking different parts of the hill. The idea was bold enough to have chance. If the old mining tunnels were still get-in, they could give both hide and cover while giving many outways that would be hard for Volkov's folks to cover good. But it would also mean ditching the cabin's guard pluses and going into underpassages that might be not safe after more than 100 years of no care. It's risky, Ezra said, thinking through the fight what-ifs. Those tunnels could have falls, bad air, water. But it's better than sitting here waiting to die, Sarah cut in. And if Mama was right about the proof, she hid. We need to live long enough to make sure it gets to folks who can use it. As early light came over the weighted hill cabin, Ezra found himself thinking a plan that was part army ways and part kid adventure tale. The book had shown the real bets of their spot. This wasn't just about Sarah's safe anymore, but about right for Elena and answer for bads that had gone no punish for years. Outside, in the growing light, Marcus Volkov's guys kept their spots with the weight of hunters who knew their prey had no run spot. Inside the cabin, an old fighter and the daughter of his lost love got ready for a bet that would either lead to free or end in their deaths in the ditched tunnels under the Colorado hills. The book lay open on the table, its pages showing stabs that wanted a payback and secrets that were worth any risk to keep. Whatever happened in the hours ahead, Sarah Whitmore was set that her mom's give-up would not be for nothing, and that the guys who did for Elena's death would face the ends of their bads. The blood-marked map that would flip everything lay hidden behind a fake panel in Ezra's sleep room, and Sarah found it while hunting for extra bullets during what they both knew might be their last hours in the cabin. She had been step-by-step checking every hide spot Ezra had shown her, getting ready for their wild getaway try through the hill tunnels. When her fingers found the panel that seemed a bit different from the around wood, the map, when she finally got it out, was handmade on measure paper and marked with dates over nearly 2 decades. But what made Sarah's breath stop in her throat were the rust-color stains spread across its face. Stains that could only be blood and spots marked with small crosses that looked scary like grave signs. "Mr. Ezra," she called soft, her voice carrying a note of find that brought him right to her side. When Ezra saw what she'd found, his face went white. This was the map he'd hoped never to need, the record of secrets he'd planned to take to his grave. But stuff had gone beyond his hold, and the time for guarding Sarah from hard truths had passed. "Sarah, there are things about why I came to this hill that I never meant to tell you," he said heavy, taking the map from her shaking hands. "Things that your mom knew, but never got the full size of." The map showed the spot of something called the Elena Mine. "Named," Sarah got with growing shock, "after her mom. But the crosses spread across its face told a tale way darker than simple mining doings." "This isn't just about gold, is it?" Sarah asked, looking at the careful notes that covered the map's face. "No," Ezra said, sinking into his chair like a guy carrying weight too heavy for his shoulders. "It's about right and about bads that big folks thought they could hide in these hills." The reel came out slow, each show more shocking than the last. 20 years ago, Ezra hadn't come to the hill looking for a loan after Vietnam. He'd come as part of a secret boss job to check the gone of Fed watchers who'd been set to talk against bad figures, including Marcus Volkov. "The Elena mine isn't a gold mine," Ezra told, his voice heavy with years of blame and sorry. "It's where they hid the folks who tried to stand up to bads like Volkov, watchers, checkers, family who asked too many questions. Over the years, I found 17 bodies in those tunnels." Sarah felt her world shift again as the what-ifs became clear. "And Mama knew about this. Your mom tripped over proof of what was going when she was digging your dad's betting links. She came to me about 6 months before she did, asking questions about stuff she'd found. I tried to scare her off, but she was set to guard you from what your dad had got mixed in. The map showed not just the mine spot, but full records of every person who'd been killed and hidden there. Names, dates, how they died. It was proof that could bring down not just Volkov's group, but bad officials who'd been hiding the kills for years. This is what they're really after, Sarah said, with the clear that sometimes comes to kids when grown-ups try to overmix simple truths. They don't just want to stop Mama's proof from coming out. They want this map because it shows they've been killing folks for 20 years. Ezra nodded, serious. And if they get their hands on it, those 17 folks will stay hidden forever, and their families will never know what happened to them. But Sarah was already thinking past the now what-ifs, her mind working through chances with the plan smarts she'd got from both her parents. Elena's right brave, and even Thomas's think mind, turned now toward right instead of gain. What if we don't run? She said slow. What if we use this to make them come to us? Sarah, there are 12 armed guys out there, but they don't know we have this map, she cut in, her green eyes bright with an idea that was taking shape with scary clear. They think we're just trying to stay alive. What if we let them think they're winning? Let them get close enough to what? Sarah, you're talking about something that could get us both killed. We are probably going to die anyway, she said, with the hard reel of someone who'd learned too much about grown-up stabs in too short time. But if we die, at least we can make sure this proof lives. And if we live, we can make sure all those folks get right. As early light came, Sarah told a plan that was part army plan and part right payback. Instead of running through the mining tunnels, they would use the tunnels as a trap, pulling Volkov's guys into the underpassages where more numbers would be less help, and where the real proof of years of kills would be hard to say no to. You want to turn the mine into a fight field, Ezra said, getting the fight what-ifs of what she was saying. I want to turn it into a court spot, Sarah fixed. A place where the real comes out and folks have to face what they've done. It was bold, risky, and probably death wish. It was also, Ezra got, just what Elena would have wanted her daughter to do. Fight for right, no matter the own cost, and make sure that bad didn't win just because good folks were too scared to take risks. Your mom would be proud of you, Ezra said soft, looking at Sarah's face and seeing Elena's brave shown in features that were growing more grown up by the hour. Then let's make sure she gets to be proud, Sarah answered, her voice carrying the kind of will that had once made her mom willing to face down bads and bad officials in guard of what was right. Outside the cabin, Marcus Volkov's guys kept their spots, sure that time and winter would at last make their targets give up or wild. They had no way of knowing that inside the weighted cabin. The targets were getting ready not to run, but to hit back with proof that would show bads going back 2 decades and going into levels of bosses and law folks they'd thought were safe beyond answer. The blood-marked map lay on the table between them, its marks of proof to wrongs that had gone no punished for too long. In a few hours, those stains would either be joined by fresh blood as Sarah and Ezra made their final stand, or they would become the base for a payback that would bring right to the 17 folks who died for trying to do what was right. The Elena mine was about to live up to its name in ways that Marcus Volkov and his group could never have guessed. And the little girl who'd been ditched as pay for betting ode was getting ready to get a very different kind of ode. One measured in right rather than cash, and one that wanted pay in real rather than blood. Winter was coming to the hills, but the real bad weather was about to break under in tunnels where secrets had been hidden for years, and where Sarah Whitmore was set to make sure they finally saw the light Ezra's wore. Book showed itself to Sarah as both fight guide and Phil Spill when she found it in his pack while getting ready. For what they both got might be their last fight. The leather book held 20 years of full watches about the hill, the mine, and the ghosts of choices that had shaped every day of his own picked alone. I kept notes of everything, Ezra told, as Sarah read notes that showed not just the real proof of kills he'd found, but the mind cost of holding such knowing alone. Every body I found, every bit of proof I got back, every time I messed up saving someone who might still be alive if I'd acted quicker or smarter. The book notes painted a pic of a guy bugged by Exact, a old fighter who'd used army rules to the check of bads that law folks had either skipped or on purpose hidden. But between the fight watches and proof lists were own thoughts that showed the field cost of his 20-year job. September 15th, 2019, found what's left of Maria Santos, the money person who was going to talk about Volkov's cash cleaning. Been dead maybe 6 months. Her family still thinks she ran off with a guy. How do I tell them their daughter died trying to do the right thing? March 22nd, 2021. Elena came to see me today. She's figured out more than I hoped anyone would. I tried to scare her away from this, but she has that look in her eyes, the same one she had when we were kids, and she decided something was worth fighting for. I'm scared she's going to end up like the others. June 8th, 2021, Elena's dead. Car crash, they're calling it. But I know what crashes look like and what kill looks like. Thomas dropped his own wife to them. And now I have to live with the knowing that I could have stopped this if I trusted her enough to tell her the whole reel. Sarah read each note with growing getting of the weight Ezra had been holding, and the way her mom's death had nearly broke him fully. But she also saw something else in the book's pages, full fight plans for spots very much like the one they now faced. You've been getting ready for this for years, she said, looking at drawings that showed every tunnel in, every guard spot, every possible getaway in the mine bunch. I've been getting ready for the day when I'd have to make a stand, Ezra said. I just never thought it would be to guard Elena's daughter. The last get-readies took most of the day with Sarah showing herself key in ways that would have wowed grown-ups who still thought of her as just a scared kid. Share-membered tunnel maps with the exact of someone whose life hung on perfect recall, learned to work-talk gear that would let them team their guard, and took in fight info with the focus of a born planner. If we get split in the tunnels, Ezra said, going through the just-in-case steps one last time, you know the meat spots, you know the getaway paths, and you know where the proof hides are stashed. We're not going to get split, Sarah said, with the full sure of someone who picked that some ends were just not okay. As afternoon went toward evening, they could see more doing in Volkov's camp. Guys were checking gear, cleaning guns, and moving with the goal energy of folks getting ready for due. The wait was about to enter its last part. They're going to try a night hit, Ezra saw, watching the get-readies through his look glasses, probably thinking we'll be tired and mixed after days of being stuck in here. Let them come, Sarah said, her voice carrying a hard that would have broke her mom's heart, even as it made Elena proud. We'll be ready. The plan they made was mixed but doable, needing exact time and full trust between them. They would ditch the cabin just before the hit started, using the tunnel system to set themselves where they could run the fight field, while making sure that Volkov's guys would be forced to face the real proof of their bads. Sarah, you get that once we start this, there's no going back, Ezra said as they made final checks of their gear. Win or lose, after tonight, everything changes. Everything already changed the day Daddy drove off and left me here, Sarah answered. Tonight we just make it real. As dark settled over the hill, they could hear Volkov's guys moving into spot for what they clearly meant to be the last hit on the cabin. Voices came across the open as team bosses teamed their come, and the sure tone said they thought little fight from a tired old guy and a scared kid. Time to go, Ezra said, putting his pack on and checking his guns one last time. They slipped out of the cabin through the root hole. Using a tunnel Ezra had dug years ago as a just-in-case getaway, the way led right into the old mining bunch, skipping all the watch spots Volkov's guys had set around the cabin's edge. As they moved through the underpassages, Sarah felt the weight of past around them. These tunnels had seen years of wrong. Folks killed for trying to do right. Families wrecked by bad. Real hidden as deep as the bodies that lay in no-mark graves through the mine bunch. This is where it ends, she whispered as they reached the middle room, where Ezra had been storing proof for 20 years. The room was bigger than Sarah had thought, with many tunnels going off in different ways and proof boxes built into the rock walls. But what ran the space were the graves. 17 careful marked bury spots where Ezra had laid to rest the herd of bads that big folks had thought would never be found. Every one of these folks died because they thought real was more big than safe, Ezra said quiet, waving toward the graves. Tonight we find out if they were right. Above them, they could hear the sound of the hit starting as Volkov's guys stormed the empty cabin. It would take them several minutes to get their targets had gone, and several more to find the tunnel in that would lead them under. Spots, Ezra said, and Sarah moved to the talk station they'd set earlier, ready to team their guard of the underbunch. Thela's fight was about to start. not just for their lives, but for the memory of everyone who died in these tunnels, and for the rule that right late shouldn't mean right skipped. In the dark of the Elena mine, ringed by the graves of folks who died for trying to do what was right, an 8-year-old girl and a bugged old fighter got ready to make their stand against bad that had worked with no punish for way too long. The book lay open by Sarah's talk gear, its pages showing 2 decades of hurt and get ready. Tonight, those get-readies would be tested in ways that would say if Ezra's watch had been meaning give up or sad waste. But Sarah felt no doubt about the end. She had her mom's ring on her thumb, her mom's brave in her heart, and her mom's sense of right guiding her picks. Whatever happened in the hours ahead, Elena Whitmore's daughter was set that the real would finally see the light. Even if that light had to shine in the dark of Anditched Mine, where 17 folks waited for their tales to be. Told Sarah's mom's locket showed its last secret in the moments before the underfight started, and the key it held would prove to be as big as any gun in saying the end of their wild fight for right. Sarah had been checking her gear one last time when her fingers found the hook she'd never seen before. A tiny thing that opened the locket to show not just Elena's photo, but a small brass key tucked behind it. "Mr. Ezra," she whispered quick, showing him the key as the sound of guys entering the tunnel system echoed from the passages above them. Ezra knew Thiki right away. It was the type used for safe boxes, and its spot in Elena's locket sure what they'd guessed about her get-readies for guarding her daughter. But there was no time to talk what-ifs, as the fight spot wanted now focus. "They're in the tunnels," Ezra said, hearing the voices that came through the mine's sound waves with scary clear. At least 8 guys moving in 2 teams. "Can we hold them in the main way?" Sarah asked, her voice steady despite the size of what they were about to try for a while. "But at last they'll figure the tunnel setup and start side us." Ezra made last fixes to the boom charges he'd set at key-tight spots through the mine. "Sarah, are you fully sure about this?" "Once shooting starts, there won't be any chance to change your mind." "I'm sure," she said, her green eyes showing the lamplight with a focus that reminded Ezra strong of Elena at her most set. "These folks killed my mom and tried to sell me like stuff. Someone has to make them pay." The first swap of gunfire came sooner than guessed. As Volkov's front team hit the guard spots Ezra had set in the mine's upper levels, the sound of autoguns echoed through the tunnels with ear hurt loud. But the sound waves that made talk hard also made it hard for the hitters to team their moves good. "First team is stuck in Tunnel 3, Sarah said from her spot at the talk gear, watching radio chat she'd learned to catch. "Second team is trying to find a other way through the lower ways." "Let them come," Ezra said, serious, checking his gun and moving to a shoot spot that covered the main come to the proof room. "The deeper they get into this maze, the more pluses shift to our side." But the fight wasn't going fully to plan. Volkov's guys were better trained and better geared than Ezra had guessed, and they were getting used to the tunnel spot faster than he'd hoped. Worse, their radio talk showed they had full maps of the mine bunch. Info that should have been hard for them to get. "How do they know about the lower tunnels?" Sarah asked, looking at the fight show Ezra had made to track bad moves. "Someone told them," Ezra said, serious. "Someone who's been here before." The answer came as a known voice echoing from the tunnel in. Thomas Whitmore calling out to his daughter with words that made Sarah's blood go cold. "Sarah, I know you're down there. I've come to take you home." The stab was full now. Not only had Thomas dropped his daughter to bads and set his wife's kill, but he was helping those same bads hunt Sarah through the tunnels where proof of their bads lay hidden. "Daddy sold us out," Sarah said, her voice carrying a flat that talked of feels too mixed for tears. "He gave them maps of the mine. Sarah, you need to get something." Thomas's voice kept getting closer as he moved deeper into the tunnel system. "These folks aren't going to let any of us live. If they don't get what they want. Your mom's proof, whatever she hid, it's not worth dying for." "It was worth her dying for," Sarah called back, her young voice carrying clear through the mine's sounds. "Oh, and it's worth you dying for, too." The words hung in the air like a call, and Ezra saw something in Sarah's look that was both heartbreak and lift. The moment when a kid finally gets that some grown-ups can't be fixed, and that right sometimes wants standing against the very folks who should have guarded you. "Sarah, please," Thomas called, wild creeping into his voice. "I'm your dad. I love you." "You killed my mom," Sarah answered, her voice bouncing off the tunnel walls with perfect clear. The boom stash that would say the last end of their wild fight lay hidden in the deepest part of the Elena mine. and Ezra's pick to use it would need a give-up that would test everything he'd learned about love, loss, and the real meaning of guarding someone you care about. The boom charges had been his safe plan for 20 years. Enough bang to fall the whole mine bunch and hide its secrets forever, if he was ever forced to pick. "Between show and wipe, Sarah, I need you to hear very careful," Ezra said as the sound of Volkov's last hit grew closer, echoing through the tunnels with the focus of guys who knew this was their last chance to stop years of bads from seeing day. "There's a way behind the proof boxes that leads to an old air hole. It comes out about half a mile down the hill near the ranger spot path." "I'm not leaving you," Sarah said with the full shore of someone who'd already lost too many folks she cared about. "You're not leaving me. You're finishing the job." Ezra's voice carried the boss of someone who'd spent his grown life making hard picks in live or die spots. "Someone has to live to make sure your mom's proof reaches folks who can use it. Someone has to tell the tale of the folks hidden in these tunnels." The sound of booms and autoguns was getting closer now, marked by Volkov's voice yelling orders that made it clear he was willing to bring down the whole hill rather than let Sarah get away with info that could wreck his group. "The safe box key," Sarah said, getting the fight real even as her heart fought it. "Even if they kill us both, someone else can use it to get Mama's proof." "That's right, but they have to know the key is real, and they have to know where to find it." Ezra moved to the boom stash, his hands working with the quick of someone who'd spent years getting ready for this second. "Sarah, I'm going to make a pull-away that will give you time to reach the air hole. When you get to the ranger spot, you tell them about Box 247 at First National Bank in Denver. You tell them about the 17 folks hidden in this mine. You tell them everything." Before Sarah could fight more, the proof room blew into mess as Volkov's hit team broke through Ezra's last guard line. 6 guys in fight gear poured into the room, their guns aimed on the spots where they thought to find their targets stuck, and no help. What they found instead was Ezra McCallum standing in the center of the room, ringed by the graves of their hurt, holding a boom click that was linked to enough boom to turn the whole mine bunch into a hole. "Guys," Ezra said chatty, his voice carrying the calm of someone who'd made peace with hard picks. "You think you're looking for something that belongs to this little girl." Sarah had moved to the hidden way, but she hadn't gone in. Instead, she stood where Volkov's guys could see her, her mom's locket shining in the lamplight, and her green eyes showing a will that would have made Elena proud. "The key you want is in this locket," she said clear, a young voice carrying through the room with perfect clear. "The key that opens the safe box where my mama hid all the proof about your bads." Volkov himself showed in the room his light eyes taking in the fight spot with the check off someone who'd built a bad empire by getting when to fight and when to talk. "Miss Whitmore," he said, with the kind of nice that made his threats scarier than yelling would have been. "You're a very brave little girl, but this doesn't have to end with anyone else dying." "Give me the key and I'll make sure you're taken care of the way you took care of my mom," Sarah asked, her voice carrying the bad honest that only kids have when they've learned the worst truths about grown-up do. "Your mom made picks that put her family in risk," Volkov answered. "I'm giving you the chance to make better picks." "I am making better picks," Sarah said, and she pulled the locket chain over her head, holding it up so everyone in the room could see it clear. "I picked to make sure everyone knows what you did to those 17 folks. I picked to make sure my mama's death means something. And I picked to trust the guy who loved her enough to spend 20 years guarding the real." The standoff stretched for forever seconds with Ezra's finger on the click. Sarah holding the locket that held the key to bringing down a bad empire, and Volkov's guys thinking angles and chances with the wild energy of folks whose lives hung on making the right pick in the next few seconds. "You pull that, old guy, and you kill the girl too," Volkov said, playing his last card. "Maybe," Ezra agreed. "But I'd rather see her die free than live as your stuff. And I'd rather see this mine become her mark than let it stay your private graveyard." Sarah made the pick that ended the standoff. With a move too quick for anyone to stop, she threw the locket not toward Volkov's guys or toward the way that would lead to safe, but right at Ezra's feet. "Make sure it gets to the right folks," she said, her voice carrying across the room with the clear shore of someone who'd found her goal in the worst possible stuff. Ezra's eyes met hers for one last second, and in that look passed all the love he'd felt for her mom, all the sorry for chances missed and words not said, and all the proud he felt in the daughter Elena had raised to value real above safe. "Tell them about Elena," Sarah said. And then she was moving toward the airway with the speed and quick that only kids have when their lives hang on fast moves. Volkov's guys opened fire right away, but Ezra was already clicking the charges that would bring down the Elena mine forever. The boom, when it came, shook the whole hill and could be felt for miles in every way. In the ranger spot 15 miles south, help folks felt the ground shake and saw dust rising from the hilltops. They would find Sarah Whitmore coming out from an old mining air hole 3 hours later, holding her mom's locket and a tale that would make big news across the land. The Elena mine was gone, fallen into a hole that would serve as a mark to the 17 folks who died for trying to do what was right. But their tales would finally be told, their families would finally know the real, and the bad group that had hidden them would face right at last. Somewhere in the mess that had once been the proof room. The key to Safe Box 247 waited tune-lock secrets that would bring down bad officials, show years of kill and plot, and prove that some reels are too big to stay hidden forever. Sarah Whitmore came out from the hill alone, but not beat, holding her mom's left, and the knowing that Ezra McCallum had kept his promise to guard Elena's daughter no matter what it cost him. The fight was over, but the war for right was just starting. The new family photo that Sarah would treasure for the rest of her life was only in her memory. But it was more real than any pic taken by cameras could ever be. It was the pic of herself and Ezra that last morning. In the cabin when he taught her to make coffee, the wayfighters learned in the field and she'd shown him how to braid. Her hair the way her mom had done every day before school. 6 months after the Elena mine fell into past and right, Sarah sat in the Denver courtroom where Marcus Volkov was getting his call. Life without out for 17 counts of kill, plus extra charges for bad group, cash cleaning, and plot that would make sure he never breathed free air again. The safe box key had unlocked just what Elena had promised. A pile of proof so full that even bad officials couldn't skip. The bad will be held right away to Fedhold. Judge Catherine Morrison said no link to Elena, but Sarah felt the same of names was her mom's way of making sure right came full circle. The court also wants to praise the brave of the watcher whose talk made this win possible. Sarah looked up from her seat in the watch spot, where she sat between her new guard, FBI agent Maria Santos, sister of one of the hurt found in the Elena mine and the hurt help talker who'd helped her go through the mixed way of talking against one of the most risky bad groups in the West United States. The past 6 months had brought changes Sarah couldn't have dreamed during those wild days in the hill cabin. Her dad, Thomas Whitmore, had died in the mine fall. And while Sarah was sad for the guy he might have been, she couldn't cry for the guy he'd really become. More big, she'd found that Elena had made plans for just this. Spot. Law papers that picked Agent Santos as Sarah's guard if anything happened to both her parents. "Your mom was smarter than any of us got," Agent Santos had told during their first meet. "She knew she was in risk, and she made sure you'd be guarded by folks who got what she was trying to do." The law doings had been mixed, but in the end, good. 17 families had finally learned what happened to their gone family. Bad officials who'd hidden the bads were facing their own charges. And a bad group that had worked with no punish for years was being step by step taken apart by Fed law folks who finally had the proof they needed. "Sarah," Agent Santos said as they left the courthouse, "there's something I want to show you." They drove to a small graveyard on the edge of Denver, where a new path had been set for the hurt got from the Elena mine. 17 headstones bore the names of folks who died for trying to do what was right. And at the center of the mark was a sign that read, "Elena Morrison Whitmore, loved mom, brave truth teller, guard of the nice." But next to Elena's sign was another stone, and this one made Sarah's breath stop in her throat. Ezra McCallum, fighter, guard, keeper of promises. He brought them all home. The FBI wanted to know what he did. Agent Santos told soft. 20 years of getting proof, guarding watchers, and finally making the give-up that brought right for everyone. He earned the right to rest with the folks he spent his life trying to guard. Sarah knelt by Ezra's sign and put her hand on the carved stone, feeling the warmth that late afternoon sun had stored in the stone. "Thank you for keeping your promise," she whispered, touching her mom's ring, where it hung on a chain around her neck. She'd grown enough that it almost fit her finger now, but she liked to keep it close to her heart. The months ahead would bring new hard. As Sarah got used to life with a guard who got the weight of the secrets she held and the hurt she'd lived, there would be talk meets to help work what she'd gone through, school checks to say how her stopped school could be started again, and quiet chats about the diff between right and get back. But there would also be good things. Agent Santos lived in a house with a garden where Sarah could grow the flowers her mom had loved. She would go to a school where her smarts would be pushed and her strong would be liked. And she would grow up knowing that when bad seemed too much, sometimes normal folks could still make picks that changed everything. "Do you miss the hill?" Agent Santos asked as they drove home from the graveyard. Sarah thought the question serious. The way she'd learned to think all questions since, those days in the cabin when getting wrong could mean live or die. "I miss him," she said at last. "I miss the way he made me feel safe even when everything was risky. I miss the way he talked about Mama like she was the most big person who ever lived. But I don't miss being scared all the time, and I don't miss feeling like I was all alone in the world." "You're not alone now," Agent Santos said soft, "and you never have to be alone again." As summer turned toward fall, Sarah started 8th grade at a school where her teachers knew she'd gone through things that most grown-ups never face, but where she was still expected to master numbers and write book talks like any other kid. She made friends careful but real, learning to trust again while keeping the parts of her tale that were too heavy for kids to hold. In the evenings, she would work in the garden with Agent Santos, learning to pull life from dirt and seeds the way Ezra had taught her to pull fire from wet wood and whey from star shapes. The flowers they grew were living things that bloomed and faded with the times, unlike the metal and stone flowers in the graveyard where her mom rested. The flowers that never die, Sarah sighed on evening as they planted bulbs that would bloom the next spring, remembering her mom's hidden message about where big things were kept safe. "What's that?" Agent Santos asked. "Something Mama used to say." "I thought she meant the graveyard flowers, but I think she really meant the memories we keep alive by telling the real about folks we love." On the year day of the mine fall, Sarah went back to the Colorado Hills with Agent Santos and a small group of Fed officials who were giving a mark at the spot where the Elena mine had once worked. The hole had been filled and fixed, and a simple mark listed the names of all the hurt who'd been got from the tunnels. But Sarah spent most of the due looking up at the tops around them, remembering the sound of Ezra's voice, teaching her to read weather in cloud shapes, and the feel of her mom's ring warming against her thumb during those cold hill nights when she'd learned what it meant to have someone willing to die to guard you. "They're both still here," she said quiet to Agent Santos as the official due ended and the other visitors started making their way back to the parking spot. "In the mark, you mean?" "Everywhere," Sarah said, waving toward the hills that ringed them. "In the trees, Ezra taught me to know in the rocks where Mama's proof was hidden. In the sky that covers all the places where folks do brave things, even when they're scared." As they drove away from the mark and back toward Denver, Sarah felt something she hadn't felt since the morning her dad had driven off and left her at a stranger's cabin. A sense awful, as if all the spread bits of her life had at last set themselves into a pick that made sense. She had a home where she was wanted and guarded. She had a guard who got that strong could live with nice, and that right was worth chasing even when it wanted give up. She had the knowing that her mom's death had meaning and that Ezra's promise had been kept. Most big, she had learned that families weren't just about blood links, but about folks picking to guard and care for each other no matter the cost. Elena had picked to guard Sarah even knowing it might cost her life. Ezra had picked to guard them both despite 20 years of alone and sad. Agent Santos had picked to build a new life around a kid who'd lived things that should have broke her spirit. And Sarah had picked to honor all of their give-ups by living a life worth of the love they'd given her. By speaking real even when it was hard, and by remembering that some promises are too big to break no matter what they cost. The new family photo might be only in memory, but it would last longer than any pic printed on paper. It was the pic of folks who'd picked love over fear, right over safe, and hope over give up. It was the pic of a family made not by blood, but by the pick to guard what mattered most, no matter the own cost. As they reached the city edge of Denver, Sarah touched her mom's ring through her shirt and smiled at the thought that Elena Morrison Whitmore would be proud of the daughter she'd raised and the left she'd made. The little girl who'd been ditched as time out had grown into someone who got that the most big lessons about family, right, and brave couldn't be taught in rooms, but had to be learned in the hot test of hard picks and full love. The hill would always be with her, not as a place of fear and wild, but as the spot where she found who she was meant to become and what she was able to do when the folks she loved were counting on her to be brave.